Have you ever felt like you can't handle something, you can't cope? You find something unbearable. You might say, I can't bear it. This is what we call low frustration tolerance. And in cognitive behavioural therapy, it is one of the key rigid beliefs. So today we are going to be looking at these types of beliefs, and by the end of the class today, you're going to have the tools and techniques to help deal with it, and you're going to be able to help see if you are having these types of beliefs. So let's get started. So we've all been in those situations where we just feel like we're going to explode. Those situations where you feel like you're just building up and up as if they're just carrying on and you can't take any more. You might say, if this carries on going on, it's going to be too much. This is too much for me to handle. So in cognitive behavioural therapy, there was a guy called Albert Ellis, and I might have taught about him before. He was one of the originators of cognitive behavioural therapy, and back at the beginning, it was something called rational emotive behaviour therapy. But don't be too confused by the details. They are very similar systems. And he created this term called low frustration tolerance. And that is when we use these kinds of beliefs during difficult situations. So you remember, we've already done the shoulds, right? Or the needs or the have tos. This must happen. This should happen. I need this to happen. And if it doesn't, it means that I can't handle it. So that low frustration tolerance a lot of the time is linked to that rigid demand, that should, that has to, that needs to. So let's give you a few examples. You might say, I can't handle the fact that my partner doesn't listen to me when I want them to. And maybe you feel yourself getting irritated and frustrated when they don't listen to you the way that you want them. Another common one is when our children are screaming, and you might say, I can't handle it anymore. I can't handle it when they're screaming so much. I can't bear that happening. You might not like the way somebody else behaves or the way somebody else talks. And you might say, I can't bear it when you say that, or I can't handle it when you say that. And can you see that this type of thinking is very rigid? It's quite extreme. When we say that, I can't handle it, I can't cope, it's as if we can't take any more. And what would really happen if that were really true? If we can't cope, if we can't bear it, what would happen to us? What does it really mean? We'd probably explode. And is it possible for a human being even to explode? I've never seen an exploding human. I've seen an angry human or an irritated human, but I've never seen an exploding one. So if you do have this type of thinking, begin to look at the situations in your life where you have it. Notice the situations, the people, the circumstances where you feel things are too much, where you think they are unbearable. And generally speaking, in these types of situations, there will also be a demand or a rigid belief. You might need something to be a particular way, and if it's not how you want it, you can't handle it. You might need your children to be quiet or behave as you want them to, otherwise you can't handle it or you can't bear it. It's just too much. Maybe you've put up with things long enough. So begin to focus on those situations where you do have these types of beliefs. So now here's the good bit. We're going to look at the questions to ask so that you don't have to feel this way all the time. Now, as you know, the main question we like to ask is it true? What evidence have you got? Is it really true that you can't bear this anymore? Is that a fact? Now, the truth is, like if our baby or our child were to carry on screaming, we might be really irritated, angry, upset, frustrated, but we're still going to be there. Nothing's going to happen. So was it really true that we couldn't bear it, we couldn't tolerate it? Probably not. Now, if someone behaves a particular way and we say we can't handle it, is that really true? Is it really true that you can't handle it? I know it feels that way, and sometimes we judge our circumstances by how we feel, but is it really true that you can't handle it for sure? And again, the chances are, even if what we don't like carries on, we're still going to be there. We're going to be upset or angry or have all sorts of difficult emotions, but we will be handling it in our own way. It might not be ideal, it might not be great, it might not be how we want it to be, but we will be handling it. So it's not totally true. We couldn't say that that is a universal truth that I can't handle it or I can't cope. And the truth of being human being, a lot of the time we can tolerate and cope with a lot more than we think we can. If you look at great sportsmen, great athletes, they might tell themselves, I can't handle any more training, I can't cope with it, I can't deal with it, and their coach can always push them to greater limits, greater highs. So a lot of the time our own beliefs aren't necessarily grounded in reality. Now, what's the truth when we say we can't really handle it? The truth is that, well, it's really difficult. Things are not easy, they are very hard. It is very hard when your child is screaming all the time. It is very hard and difficult when you're with someone or in a situation that you are finding very challenging. There's no doubt about it. That's the truth. It is difficult. Now that is closer to reality in comparison to I can't handle it, I can't cope with it, I can't bear it. Can you see the difference? One side we're saying it's very difficult, it's challenging, it's not easy. The other side is I can't handle it, I can't cope. Now, if you're telling yourself, I can't handle it, I can't cope, then you're just totally shut out from what's happening and you have to leave, move into avoidance, walk away. If you're telling yourself, well, it's very difficult, it's really difficult, but I am still here, but I am handling it, then can you see that's slightly more flexible? That's slightly more consistent with reality. If we look at those situations where you're struggling in life and where you tell yourself you can't handle it, the truth is it's really hard. It's really hard and it's really difficult. But that is closer to the truth than telling yourself you can't handle it. Because most of the time we continue to handle it. We might not handle it in the way that we want. We might not cope in the way that we want. We might cry, we might get angry, we might shut down, but we are still handling it. Can you see that? Even if we go and chat to a therapist or a coach, we are handling it in our own way. So the idea of saying I can't handle it, I can't cope isn't really true. Telling yourself it's difficult for me to manage, it's really hard, it's very challenging, can you see that that is more consistent with reality? That is close to the truth. So that's the first thing to see. When we look at the empirical evidence, we can see that it's not totally true. It's not true all the time. And in actual fact, we can create something which is a bit more flexible. It is difficult, it is hard, but we are handling or we can cope with it. Now, if you were telling yourself that it is difficult and challenging, but tolerable, how do you think you'd be behaving differently? How do you think you would be acting differently in those situations if you were telling yourself, well, it's really hard, but I am tolerating it? Can you see how that creates the opportunity for us to move forward, for us to deal with it effectively? Whereas if you're telling yourself, I can't handle it if that happens, well, you're just ready to emotionally explode. You can see the difference between the two. If you're telling yourself you can't handle it, there's only so much you're willing to tolerate before you walk away. Whereas if you get present to the difficulty, that helps us be more realistic and we can carry on moving forward and become more resilient. Resilience is a big buzzword nowadays, and learning to be resilient is about learning to be realistic about how difficult things are, but they are manageable, they are tolerable. Okay, so let's look at the next argument. Is it helpful when we tell ourselves I can't handle it, I can't cope, I can't bear? Is it helping us? What's the impact when you tell yourself that? Imagine you get up in the morning, you're going through your day, and you're telling yourself, I can't handle it if this happens. How are you going to be feeling? Imagine whatever you're afraid of, and telling yourself that, you're probably going to be feeling on edge. I would be. You're going to be feeling nervous. You're going to be wanting to avoid what it is you're afraid of, what it is you're worried about. It's going to be a lot of tension. And I would imagine that is an uncomfortable belief to have, because you're not really giving yourself any way to get out of that except avoidance. So that belief is not helpful. If anything, it's going to make you more angry, more irritable, more anxious. Whatever it is that you're experiencing, that belief is only going to make you feel worse. So it's not a helpful belief to have. It's not useful. And on the flip side, if you're telling yourself it's difficult, it's challenging, but it's bearable, that's more consistent with reality, you can see how that is keeping you in the conversation, it's keeping you engaged, and it is more realistic. Okay, good. So begin to look in your own life, see if you can find these types of beliefs. And if you do have these types of beliefs, firstly, what you want to do is you want to look at the evidence. Is it true? Is it totally true? Or is there something more nuanced? Instead of it being saying, I can't handle it, I can't cope, maybe close to the truth is, it's really hard, it's really difficult. Be real with yourself. Remember, this isn't positive thinking. We're not teaching you to be high-fiving everyone and having a good time. We're helping you to be realistic about how difficult it actually is. It's difficult but bearable. The second question you're going to ask yourself is it helpful? Is this belief helpful to me? Is it helping me achieve my objectives? Yes or no? Is it helping me feel more relaxed? And if not, looking at something which is more flexible, more consistent with reality. So that's all for now, guys. Good work today. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.